HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Getting It in the Head. Stories by Mccormack. Read by Roger Clark and Esther Wane. The Gospel of Knives. When I opened the door and saw her standing there like an effigy, draped from head to toe in some fashion paraphrase of a chador, my mind flamed with a single sordid thought. I wanted to get down on my knees before her in that sweetest of all acts of sexual worship and lick her out good and proper. I could see from her face, the swarthy skin, the too even set of her teeth, the retroussé nose, that this was a woman of pent-up desires and trammelled passions, and I fancied that I was the man to rectify all that. I glowed with confidence. Here was easy meat, and it was as much as I could do to stop a predatory grin from spreading over my own teeth. However, when I invited her into my room and she spread out her collection of knives on the table, I knew that I had made one of the bigger mistakes of my young and now bitter life. "I'm a seller of knives," she said needlessly, arranging the gleaming pieces on the table, "and I'm here to sell you one of these." I swallowed heavily, eyeing the array of steel which had so quickly covered the table. I would never have guessed that there were so many variations on the single theme of the blade. "I'm sorry," I stammered, "but I've got all the knives I need. I've got a bread knife, and a set of steak knives, and a short blade for peeling. I live on my own, so you can see then that I'm not exactly in the market for a new one." "No," she said quietly. "I think if you look closely at the circumstances of your life, you will find that there is ample room in it for one extra blade. No one's life is so complete that they can afford to do without one of these knives." "I thought you were selling encyclopedias, or you were some kind of Jehovah's Witness," I said plaintively. "No, I'm a seller of knives. My work is to spread the gospel of knives, because in the beginning was the knife. All other versions are fiction. My job is to spread the redemptive word of the knife. Answer me this, what is the greatest of man's inventions?" "I suppose you're going to tell me it's the knife?" "Of course, there is no other answer. Taken unawares, most people say it's the wheel or fire, but they are wrong, because the knife is at the source of all. When man picked up his first knife and started cutting and sawing and slicing, it was the opening moment of his humanity, the instant of his divinity. Now, in all my years in this ministry, I've never met a man who did not need a knife. I've met men who have denied God's word out of face, and I've met men who couldn't sign their name, and they've all managed without any noticeable handicap. But all these people were bound together by their need for knives. And you know why? The simple answer is that it is impossible to go through life without cutting or slicing. It wouldn't be human. If I met a man who didn't need a knife, I'd just pack up my bags and walk away, because it would be a sure sign that I had met someone who was less than human and a waste of words. But you're human, are you not?" "Yes, I suppose so." "Well, then it follows that you need one of these knives. It's unavoidable." "I've already told you that I'm full up with knives." "Have you a lover?" "Yes," I lied. "Good, because every lover needs a knife. I knew of a man once who woke up beside his beloved and saw for the first time how ugly she was. The scales had finally dropped from his eyes, and even though she was sleeping on his arm, he was so panic-stricken he started to chew his own arm off, gnawing and tearing at it like a snared animal, and it took him so long that eventually his beloved awoke and looked at him. He got such a fright that he went into shock and couldn't move. She couldn't move him either, and he died there in the bed within 15 minutes. Now, If he had one of these. She held up a short double blade, smooth and serrated. He could have had that arm off in 2 minutes and made good his escape. You wouldn't want to end up in a situation like that now, would you? That's a ridiculous story. Besides, it could never happen. My sweetheart is very beautiful. All beauty fades, but with proper care and attention a good knife will last forever. I heard a story once of a child philosopher who couldn't get his penknife sharp enough, and he spent all his time honing it until one day the blade disappeared altogether. I will never know why I made up that story. That's the story of a fanatic, she said coldly. The story of a man looking for irreducible truths. It wasn't the knife which failed him, but his imagination. The knife was probably perfectly good within its set application. What he should have done was get another knife. There is no danger of that happening with these knives. Have you ever been to prison? No. I live a virtuous and God-fearing existence. And is your life so blameless that you are utterly without fear of reckoning? The truth is that I have no life. I have no qualifications or work. I have no future, and I'm not old enough to have a past. Occasions for sin are severely limited. Nevertheless, the world is full of treacheries. One day you might find yourself incarcerated, walled up for a crime you didn't commit. Mass concrete and iron bars between you and the blue sky. You might have exhausted all words and petitions and found no succor in prayer. Then these are the knives for you. They are absolute knives. This one can cut through any substance known to man. It has never been known to fail. That's ridiculous, I retorted. Knives are sacred, she replied. I would not defile them with lies. You're serious about all this, I said incredulously. Yes, she replied, because these are serious knives. By now, any notion of sexual conquest had fled my mind completely. Her unspeakable beauty dominated the room like a caryatid from some distant, ruined temple, and her smile filled me with dread. I could almost hear her mind whirring through a set of instructions, sizing up the options before her face committed itself. It did not help either that my table was now laid out and glittering as if for some terrible total surgery. I wanted my room emptied, now bare and empty as I had always loved it. I know everything there is to know about knives, she continued. Anything I don't know about knives is a lie. Look at this one. She took up a short curved piece and juggled it neatly from hand to hand. This is a survivalist's knife, special army issue to the SAS, the U.S. Navy SEALs and other elite anti-terrorist units. It's a tungsten alloy laid over with Teflon. It's hafted by a brass tang to an ebony handle. It's the sharpest knife in creation, strictly under-the-counter material and rarer than most gems. Suddenly she hopped forward on one foot, and her arm swung down like a scythe. The knife split the air and buried itself in the door at the other end of the room. The walls resonated with the terrific impact. She withdrew the blade cleanly and handed it to me. "Now bid for it," she commanded. "I've got no money. I'm on the dole. I can't afford to go throwing away money I don't have on things I don't need." "Who said anything about money?" "You're a saleswoman," I said. "Money is what you deal in." "You're being presumptuous again. You've been that way from the moment you opened the door. I prefer to think of myself as a kind of beneficent society, like the International Gideon Society, for instance. I leave people their knives, and I walk away. I've left knives in hotel rooms and houses all over the world. Sometimes, however, I have to go door to door to get some remuneration. I have to keep body and soul together also. But I have nothing to give. Look around you. I've only these 4 walls and these 4 limbs. I have nothing to give." "That is not true. When I opened the door, you wanted to possess me. You wanted to get down on your knees and worship. We could settle for that. One knife against one loveless act of sexual possession. A fair exchange is no robbery, and since I want you, it would be an honourable transaction. I almost squealed in horror. I can't, I said, a dense wave of nausea swelling through my body. It's crazy. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Why can't you just leave me the knife and go? I could feel myself being reduced to a caricature of despair. I was on the verge of wringing my hands. I'm not a charity, she said coldly. I want you, and you need this knife. I really don't see any problem. I told you before I don't need the knife. Jesus, do I have to go on and on repeating myself? Tears were beginning to well behind my eyelids. You've just told me that you own nothing. 10 minutes of sexual humility, and you will own the finest knife in creation. What is there to be afraid of? I was suddenly sobbing, my whole body jerking like a string puppet, tears coursing down my face. Some nacreous light seemed to have spilled in the room, and the walls had taken on a tremendous slant. She was now standing before me, sphinx-like and implacable. Are you being willfully ignorant, or do I have to spell it out for you? That knife-throwing trick is the least of my talents. I do not think you want to see my full repertoire. I felt my legs collapse beneath me, and I was suddenly on the floor, watching my tears spill onto the carpet. When I looked up, she was hauling my face up by the hair, standing over me with her legs apart and holding her skirt up with her free hand. She was smiling down on me now, without humour, flashing those perfect two even teeth. That's it, boy, on your knees. Be witnessed in the true faith of the knife. She pulled my face in closer. This is going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Like a good sharp knife, in fact.
The stained glass violations. Meats for the belly, and the belly for meats. But God shall destroy both it and them. 1 Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 13. Oh, my mother, not again. Tell me it is not my time come round again. Tell me that I can stay here within you, cowering down, letting the whole thing pass over my head. Tell me you will protect and instruct me, bring me news about the world, its trials and convulsions. Tell me you will keep it at a distance from me, something abstract and objectified, never allowing it to touch me. That would make me happy. This time, all-seeing, I would be the perfect spectator, casting a cold eye from the margins, suffering none of its humiliations and pains. Yes, that is the way I want it this time. Oh, Mother, tell me it is a mistake, a momentary flaw in the structure of things. Tell me that if I close my eyes and hold my breath, time will pass me over it, and I will be able to consign it to those black pits of memory where we keep those dark and unspeakable things. And tell me also, Mother, that for fear of waking it, we would never speak of it again. Oh, my God, who am I trying to fool? She knows that if she can eat the Christ child, this terrible obsession will be at an end. That is why, in the darkness and humidity of this summer's night, she is up on the western nave of the cathedral, next to the canal, working on the window with her pliers. This is her second time here this night. On her first visit, her nerve failed her, and she was afraid to touch the Christ child. She took instead a few of the pieces that surrounded Joseph and Mary, featureless squares that were tight up to the stonework. They were background pieces without detail, and when she returned home with them, she knew that they would be useless. There would be no fulfillment in them. So now she has returned again, and this time she knows that she will have to prize the infant from Joseph's arms. Already she is nearly done. The 7 white and amber pieces that make up the image of the child have been worked from the lead strips, and she has now only to crawl along the ledge, climb down, and walk home. Her thin body is vibrating from within with the energy of neurosis and starvation. On the ground, in the shadow of the buttress, she hunkers down like an animal to collect herself. Despite the narrowness of her obsession, she has been careful. She has worn dark clothes and has kept the shadows. She has made sure to wear something with pockets. She can hear the broken image rattle around in it now. She has been careful in her choice of pliers. It has long jaws like a surgical instrument. Its inner surfaces have been milled for grip. Some of this knowledge she has researched. The pliers, for instance, and the structure of stained glass windows. But other details, the dark clothes, the pockets, and, oddest of all, the ability to climb the downspout on the cathedral wall, have been pure inspiration. She knows now that this is the knowledge of the violated, 1 part received wisdom and 2 parts black inspiration. She gathers herself now to walk homeward through the still city, hands deep in her pockets. She takes one last look up at the window and she sees that Joseph is left clutching a dark hole in his abdomen, where once was the child. Dimly she remembers a biblical text. Whosoever eats of the flesh of the lamb will have eternal life. In the darkness, she is not too sure why she should remember it, and less sure what it means. Walking through the silent city, she remembers how this horror began 1 week earlier. At lunch hour that day, she had walked into the city square already looking like a maimed thing. She had crossed the grass toward the 1 vacant bench that faced directly into the sun. She moved cautiously but with speed, threading her way among the coiled lovers who lay on the warm grass. Already she was beginning to regret having come here. The whole place, the sun, the grass, and especially the lovers, made her feel alone. She reached the bench and sank into it with a feeling of relief. This, too, was a mistake. The sun, so bright, seemed to have singled out this 1 bench for special attention, falling upon it like a white blade. She would have liked to move, but there was no other bench free. All dowdy looks and no confidence, she had neither the nerve nor the style to sit and eat on the grass. And she knew it, too. She was now on the verge of tears, and she felt bad enough without blighting the air, filling up the beautiful day with the grey substance of her loneliness. My God, she thought, why does it always have to be like this? Once, just once, couldn't it be different? She started. A thin man had loomed up before her. She hadn't seen him arrive. "Greetings, favoured one," he said. Greetings. What a strange word, she thought. He placed his thin frame on the bench beside her, and she appraised him. He was a startling old man, thin beyond belief, and even on this hot day he carried a beige mac draped over his shoulders. But what was really amazing was that although he was undeniably there beside her, with his legs stretched out before him, he projected not the clear lineaments of an identity, but the mobile and blurred contours of a confusion. He looked like someone whose true identity had one day been smudged. She thought she could dimly make out a clean-shaven, hawk-like face with pointed features, but she could not be sure. She felt that maybe deep within him there was some truer and stronger identity with sharper delineation, biding its time until it saw the moment to come forth. He was a man who gave the impression of looking unlike himself, not out of some perverse desire to deceive, but simply because this projected confusion was itself his true and inscrutable identity. Despite all this, and the added fact that his presence beside her was a negative one, an absence, like a vacuum scooped out of the air, she was not afraid. She suspected he was one of the many vagrants about the city, one who at any moment was going to tell her that he was down on his luck, going through a rough patch, and had she a pound to spare to get him a cup of tea. "Today is a beautiful day," he continued, "the sort of day which justifies the world." She persevered with the smile. "I suppose you're on lunch break," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I'm a librarian. I have to return at 2. Nice work, I'd say. Clean work. I haven't worked myself in 20 years. He was grinning now, well pleased with himself. Imagine that. 20 years and I haven't done a stroke. She liked him now, and was well glad that he had sat down beside her. She flourished one of her sandwiches, but he waved it aside. No, thanks. A man of my age need only eat a couple of times a week. You're a growing girl. Eat up. She liked him now, and she relaxed. What did you work at? She asked. I worked in a circus, he said proudly. Was born into it and worked in it for the best part of 30 years. She remembered the circuses of her childhood, and her interest quickened. What did you work at? I'll bet it was the trapeze. You're very thin. No, not the trapeze. I had no head for heights. Guess again. Clown? No. Ringmaster? No. Knife thrower or animal tamer? They were my favourites. No, none of those. He was smiling at her now, having teased her along like a favourite child. In all this there was something benign, something protective about him. I give up, she said. She had enjoyed the little game. Well, he began. It was very strange. I was the only act of my kind in the whole of Ireland. England, too, if I'm not mistaken. I used to eat things. Eat things? She repeated. What things? Everything. He grinned, springing his surprise. Bars of soap, small toys, metal, glass, timber, anything. Anything? Yes, anything. Oh, it's not unheard of. People eat swords, frogs, and so on. I'm even told that in England there is a man who over the space of a lifetime ate a small aircraft. Still, though, the range of my consumption was something else. There was nothing I could not digest. Can you believe that toward the end of my career I was working on a way to eat a house? It may have been all a joke, but she doubted it. He was too earnest, too obviously proud of his amazing craft. How did you start? He threw up his hands in a gesture of unknowing. I don't know. How does anyone start anything? One day you're here, and the next you find yourself in the middle of something else. I remember thinking as a child that it was strange and funny that people should limit their intake to simple foodstuffs. I knew that the world was full of things waiting to be eaten. So I asked myself what would happen if I tried some of those other things. One day I sat down to a piece of timber, a piece of softwood. I wanted this first piece to be something organic, something that would not be too much of a shock to the system. I remember it well. I can see myself to this day under the caravan, tearing strips out of that piece of timber with my teeth, as if it was a piece of meat. 3 days it took me to finish it. But I kept it down, and I knew then that my vocation had presented itself. I progressed on to metal then, small kitchen utensils that I sawed up into little chewable pieces. It took me 2 weeks to eat my first saucepan, and a further 2 months to digest it. But, again, I held it down. It was then that I set my sight on glass. You see, there is a precedent for eating metal. Copper and iron are part of our makeup. But glass is different. Glass is taboo. Glass is a killing substance, not for internal consumption. I felt, therefore, that if I could consume glass, I would be at the peak of my craft. Glass was to me what Everest was to Hillary. But first I had to prepare my constitution, toughen it up, so to speak. It was at this time that my act became part of the circus repertoire. Bleach, soap, timber, metal, that sort of thing. The rubbish man, that's how I was billed. People flocked to see me. But in all that time I was only in training. I never once lost sight of my true goal. Glass. One evening, when I felt that my system had been toughened up enough, I took a small piece of glass and ground it up real fine, like talc, and spooned it down with a glass of milk. I walked around with it for a few hours and then put my fingers to the back of my throat to see if I was bleeding. My vomit was streaked slightly with blood, but not to a worrying degree. I was pleased. However, the trick was no use as it stood. Spooning down a white dust in the middle of a 3-ring circus at 30 yards would never work. It lacked spectacle. So I had to work at consuming bigger and bigger pieces, so that it would have the necessary visual impact. When the trick was finally unveiled, I had graduated to the point where I could eat a 4 by 8-inch piece of unlaminated glass in under 2 minutes. People were amazed and shocked. In a few towns I was not allowed to perform. Priests denounced me from the pulpit and so on. He raised a forefinger into the sunlight and began to hack the air like a zealot. In the words of the Old Testament, in body and in spirit and in the image of God was man created. Therefore it behooves us to act as God himself would have us act toward that which is his temple. Such mutilation is contrary to God's will. He lowered his hand and continued. You know, even when I thought those Bible bashes were right, my audience never failed me. Night after night they turned up to see me. People seem to find gratification in other people eating shit. He suddenly brightened. Do you know that over the whole of my career, I calculate that I have eaten enough glass to build a good-sized glass house. She would be late for work, very late, but it did not matter. She was now enthralled to this strange man and his extraordinary story. She wanted to take him home and listen to his tale forever, this tale which she was sure was for her and her alone. The sunlight lay on them now like a dome, and the day was so bright it seemed as if through some magic the air itself was polished. Already the square was emptying of people like herself who had to return to work. High on the side of the cathedral, prizing out the infant Jesus, she would remember this as the moment when she should have said goodbye and walked away. She could have walked away and been saved, retaining nothing of this incident but the memory of a strange old man with an extraordinary story. But she did not move. Instead, she turned to him. So what happened? What do you do now? Well, he continued, audiences fell away in the 70s, television and all that. Our circus broke up in the mid-70s and we all went our separate ways. Some even went as far as Eastern Europe. Circus is a recognised and subsidised art form there. But I was too old, so I drifted from town to town getting menial work, living hand to mouth. By then I was in my 60s, so it was difficult to get work. There is not much call for a redundant glass eater. One day I was sitting here on this very bench, no work and sleeping rough, when a young man who recognised me came over and started talking. I told him my story, that I was out of work and so on. He told me to hang around the city for a few days till he saw if there was anything he could do. He was a student, and the upshot was that I was offered a job by the university as a resident guinea pig. The university is contracted by pharmaceutical firms to carry out tests on drugs and other substances. Sometimes they find it hard to get volunteers for the more dangerous experiments. So that's where I come in. Seemingly, I have built up an almost total resistance to poisons. I have even become an object of study myself. Sometimes they cut out parts of my stomach and digestive tract for examination. And he held up his hands in another gesture of resignation. That is how I get by. This was a strange testimony, and she felt weird hearing it. She had the eerie feeling also that it was meant especially for her. She imagined that this old man had held his tongue the whole of his life until this day, when he had walked into the square and saw her, the perfect listener, the perfect receptacle for his story. For a short moment she thought about returning to work. The square was by now almost totally deserted. But she wanted to know more. She was convinced there were things she should know before she left. It would not do to leave with just a partial image of this old man. She turned to him again. So what's it like? She asked. Eating glass? It's difficult to say. It's dangerous if you haven't got a vocation for it. It can cut up your stomach as easy as that, and you won't feel a thing. One moment you're walking around, and the next you feel lightheaded and sit down.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?